Okay, so a lot has happened during the international break, and unless you've been basically living under a rock, you should know that Newcastle are now officially or unofficially, it doesn't matter, the richest club in the world. And obviously, for Newcastle fans, this is like a dream come true. They've gone from Mike Ashley, probably the worst owner in the Premier League, or definitely up there, to we don't know how Saudi Arabia or Mohammed bin Salman or the Saudi Arabian consortium is going to be as owners, but just from a financial point of view, just they've gone from nothing to everything basically. And while there's a lot of reason to be excited, to be happy, even if you aren't a Newcastle fan, I'm sure more competition is never a bad thing. I do have to be the bearer of bad news in saying that Newcastle will not get as lucky and will not be as fortunate as Chelsea and Manchester City were. And I'll explain why. The very first thing that I think is going to hold Newcastle back is the fact that they are late to the party. The fact that Chelsea got in before FFP, Man City got in a couple of years, maybe 4 or 5 years before FFP, and Newcastle are getting in now in terms of having a wealthy, bottomless pit sort of owner who can fund the team to unimaginable heights. Newcastle are now getting in 2021, and the old saying goes, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, the second best time is now. In football, I would say the best time is before your competitors. And in comparison to Chelsea and Man City, they are about 13 to 20 years late. And even though this is not necessarily a huge deal, if Newcastle can bring in executives and football directors, people in football who are very knowledgeable and who are elite at their work and very capable of, producing results very quickly, it won't be as much of a handicap as it seems on the surface. But it has to be said that when Chelsea was bought by Roman Abramovich in 2003, I think it was, they had the advantage of being able to splash cash freely at will and really with no restraint, no sort of reins to pull them in. The only thing that was ultimately stopping them was their attractiveness as a club, which can be very easily negotiated by the fact that they were offering pretty good money at the time, much more than their competitors at least. When Roman Abramovich arrived at Chelsea, not only did he have unlimited amounts of money, but he had the advantage of being the first one there. I like to think of Abramovich as the equivalent of someone who heard about gold in California, and he was the first one there, and he was the first one to reap the benefits and, you know, take full advantage of what was there to be taken advantage of. And Chelsea were able to benefit from the fact that Abramovich invested a lot of money in comparison to the competition at the time. And that propelled Chelsea to a lot of success that compounded, to later success, where Chelsea are, for the most part, a very well run club, a very sustainable club. Alright, so fast forward 5 years later, and Man City are now playing catch up to Chelsea, but they still have the advantage of no FFP, no financial fair play that's gonna limit their ability to spend. And they were able to take full advantage of the fact that they got in before the party was over. Newcastle are a very prestigious club, a very historical club, but I cannot deviate away from the fact that Newcastle are not an attractive club. Let me repeat that. Newcastle is not an attractive club. And I'll explain why. Because having an influx of money doesn't take away from the core of the club. If you just have an influx of money and you want the skeleton of the club, that's basically what Red Bull did with RB Leipzig and RB Salzburg. You're basically just taking the bones of another club and painting over the exterior. That's not what I assume Mohammed bin Salman and the Saudi Arabian consortium are planning on doing. I assume that they're gonna try to leverage Newcastle's historical standing, prestige, and combine it with their money and I presume the expertise that they're gonna hire and create this whole bigger thing. But the fact that Newcastle are a one club city, that is a good thing as far as if you intend to buy the club. That is not such a good thing if you intend to entice people to support that club. And the reason being, I think very similar to PSG. Yes, you do attract new fans by virtue of being the one club in the city, plus you're a good team. Obviously, you're going to attract people who like to watch a good team that's based in their city. But as far as the things that make football football, Newcastle are going to suffer, unlike Manchester City, which I think was part of the Etihad Group's financial plan with regards to buying Manchester City, and unlike Chelsea, who are based in London and have London rivals, Newcastle United's rivals are Sunderland and Middlesbrough to a lesser extent. And I don't know about you, but I don't really see a League One club, and I'm not sure, I think Middlesbrough are in League One or the Championship. I don't see those as having the same appetite for potential new fans to entice them, because at the core of every club support is love and a passion for that club, and many times it's a disdain for another club. That's the reality of it, you know. Many people began supporting Man City because they did not like Manchester United, and many people began supporting Chelsea because it was an alternative to Spurs, Tottenham Hotspur, and Arsenal, and the other London clubs, West Ham, Watford, so on. So that is definitely going to hinder them. And there's other aspects that I think make Newcastle unattractive. Not necessarily unattractive in terms of it's unredeemable, but on the face, I think the kit, and not this season's kit or last season's kit, but the color scheme and patterns of Newcastle's kit do not make for something that a casual, new to football sort of fan would like. Now, that may not matter for a manager or a player because they're paid to perform and they're paid to be employed and do their job. But with regards to attracting that fan base and, growing the stature of the club, you need that sort of aesthetic aspect. And I think the colors and stripes and pattern that Newcastle have definitely does not fall into that category. And lastly, this is more so on Mike Ashley, but it does still affect the club. The club's facilities, according to Newcastle fans, are disgusting. Not literally disgusting, but they're dilapidated, they're old, they're, decrepit, they're done. And that is something that MBS is going to have to invest in. And that is something that the club is going to have to treat as a 3 to 5 year investment, for the simple fact that yes, you have a lot of money. Yes, you're the new thing in town. You're the new toy, but you're not going to attract a player like even Ousmane Dembele, who's on a downward trajectory. Having played at Barcelona, you cannot attract a player of that quality to play at a training facility that looks like it belongs in the 1950s. It just doesn't make sense. So that needs to be revamped. So that's already an automatic 3 to 5 years. And then their stadium, although it's one of the biggest in England, it isn't a state-of-the-art stadium. It isn't in line with some of the more prestigious stadiums and venues in the country or even around Europe. So that is something else that, although that is not an immediate issue, I'm sure that is something that the Saudi Arabian consortium is definitely going to have to work towards sorting out and improving upon. Finally, and I really, 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 really feel like I need to stress this, I think Newcastle are going into a new world, so to speak, that obviously they are the pioneers of, but I think the way Newcastle conducts itself over the next 5 to 10 years will be a blueprint for other billionaire investors that see that you can take an unattractive on paper club and transform it into a very, very valuable asset, provided you invest enough funds and you do things correctly. But one thing that they are going to face very, very difficult times with is the fact that there is a different level of competition today. And I'm not just talking about the fact that they're not going to have the advantages that Chelsea, Man City, and PSG had, but I'm talking about the fact that there's two other clubs, not just around Europe, but within the league that can also boast a similar amount of unlimited resources, and they've got the 10 to 20 year head start on you. That is something that does not bode well for Newcastle. And then you also factor in the fact that the historical giants of football, of English football and European football in general, although they go through cycles of unsuccess and failure, there's always a few, at least a couple of those historical giants that are successful, that are doing well, that are, living up to the reputation of the club's stature, of the club's success. Right now, Manchester United are not the club they were 15, 20 years ago. But Liverpool are now twice the club they were 15, 20 years ago. Arsenal are not the club that they were once upon a time. But you've got clubs like Tottenham, although they haven't been very good in recent years, in the last couple of years, they've had a resurgence compared to the state that they were in 20 years ago. So the cyclical nature shows that although the traditional big clubs are going to cycle in and out of success, the fact that you're going to have at least two or three of them around that top of the table, plus these two mainstays in Chelsea and Manchester City, these new money mainstays, that means that at the top of the table, you're competing with at least four clubs that have the jump on you, that are able to compete consistently, or at least consistently over a 3 year time frame, a 5 year time frame. And they're going to have to outwork and outperform those clubs for a period of time before they can fully embed themselves as being part of that group, whether they are part of the former group in the traditional clubs and, having a cyclical period of success or cyclical periods of success, or they join the mainstays that have unlimited resources. They need to find a way to supplant themselves and keep themselves there just to stand a chance of competing, as I presume more and more billionaire owners are going to copy the blueprint that Chelsea have set, that Manchester City have set, that Newcastle are going to set. So those are just my reasons and considerations for why I think Newcastle are not going to have such an easy time getting to the top. I know a few of them are a bit personal, a bit opinionated, but I do still think the point stands. There's a lot of obstacles in the way, and the Saudi Arabian consortium, Mohammed bin Salman, they're going to have to navigate through that to really supplant themselves and establish themselves at that European top table. And at the end of the day, I'm just curious to see how they're going to do it, because I'm just a football fan.